Hey guys, so I wanted to follow up with everybody about DogeWheel. And first, before we dive in, I just want to let you know, I have 100%, you know, positive feelings towards anybody who's building a project. If you believe in the project, like I'm rooting for you. And it's no different for DogeWheel. Uh, but we got to dive into some of these things and answer some of the big questions for investors. I wouldn't be looking, and what we're looking at right now is a transaction. When somebody with this address here purchased tickets to spin DogeWheel, and we're wondering, where does that BNB go? And the dev at DogeWheel answered, but we kind of wanted to dive in here and look a little bit more closely at this and follow the money and just make sure everything checks out. And there are some risks and there are some concerns, and we're going to talk about those today. It doesn't mean you shouldn't invest in it. That's a choice you get to make. But what I really feel strongly about is that if you're an investor, you have every right to ask questions. You have every right to delve deeper into these things and to follow, the money and to decide if that's something you want to invest into or not. And what I definitely shouldn't stand any longer is investors asking questions and being belittled, being booted, kicked, disrespected for that. It should be, really something that we come to expect, that investors are holding projects and devs and owners accountable to things and able to ask those questions. And by the way, the good projects that do really, really well, that build really solid communities, they're for that. They're 100% for that. And the ones that have to move around from project to project, that don't really build solid communities, that don't really, where you don't see as an investor the big return, they don't do that. They're not open to that. But you be the judge of which projects you want to invest into. At Tribe 100X, what we want to do is just open up the discussion, be able to empower investors to feel comfortable to ask the questions, to provide resources and people can help delve into these kinds of things, and let investors be the judge of what they want to do. So with that said, we have the Tribe 100X dev here, Jeremy, who's going to help us delve a little bit deeper into, where the money's going and what some of the risks are and what we're seeing. And then we'll kind of just continue this conversation with those that want to delve deeper into it. But we thought this would be a good starting point. So Jeremy, thanks for being here. And yeah, I want you to kind of take us through what we're seeing, some of the risks might be, and kind of, as we look at, this address right here, and we see that they purchased 1.53 BNB. We see this contract address right here. This is the contract address associated with DogeWheel. And we see that 0.459 BNB was transferred to this other address. So you have some things to kind of show us. So Jeremy, again, thanks for being here, and just go ahead and kind of just show us around here so we'll see what we're looking at.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so again, just to reiterate, we're not here to say whether this is safe or not, just to point out a few potential red flags and pose some questions that hopefully the devs of the actual project can answer for us. So yeah, it is interesting that this particular transaction then has a portion of the BNB going off to another address. So before we get into that piece of it, if you can just hold down the control key and click on the contract itself, we can open up a new tab just to look at that. And I'll give everybody an idea of what I normally look at as a developer when I'm checking out a contract. So in this particular contract, the first thing that you see is that, there is a balance. They have a balance of, right now it's 106. I've seen it fluctuate from 105 to 107 recently. But there is a BNB balance. So that is one potential concern, is that there's money left in the contract. It's not a bad thing. It's just it is a potential concern that as that pool, that balance grows, there is a chance, if it's possible in a smart contract, for the devs of the contract to then take that money and run. And one of the ways I usually look at to determine whether that's a possibility is to click on the contract tab down below. And you'll notice that they haven't shared the code for the contract. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you trust whoever developed the smart contract. But it is one of those, potential red flags, is that we can't, on our own, look at the code and verify that there is no self-destruct function where they can just take all the funds. There is no, transfer function where they can just transfer all of the money off of the contract into, a private wallet and go away with it, right? So that is one of the things that I'd like to look for, is to verify that there is no self-destruct on a smart contract, that there can be a quick rug pull and they just take all the money. So that's one of the red flags here. And it's only a red flag because we can't see the code, right?
And Jeremy, just really quick, so this balance right now of 106 BNB, I just want to point out to everybody that's not like extraordinarily high yet, but they just launched a few days ago. So as we go forward and investors are putting their money into this and they're believing everything's safe and so forth, without us being able to delve into the contract and know for sure that they can't just empty this, when this becomes 1,000 BNB, 5,000 BNB, that then becomes a bigger risk, right? Because if they were to do that, if it were to become such a large sum that they decided just to run off with it, that would destroy the whole project. And it just puts investors at a greater, level of risk that they may not presently be aware of. So that's why we wanted to point that out.
Right. And what's also interesting about that is the fact that the contract has a BNB balance, right? So they're not working with their native token. In this case, it's BNB that they're taking in, and then they have another mechanism for, providing the tickets to those who are buying the tickets, which lets them do their spend. And then that is what generates the actual token out to somebody, right? So the investors are not necessarily going to, I guess, care per se. You could look at that balance of BNB, as the people who own the contract, that's their, income for running this project, I guess. But that is a concern, that if they at some point just take all of that money, then what happens is when new money is coming in to buy tickets, is there going to be enough BNB then left in the contract to now go and purchase the appropriate amount of their token to then pay out the rewards to the people who are buying the tickets?
That's one concern. I just want to point out another concern. I shared this in another video. So I just want to make sure people are aware of this stuff, right? So then you decide what you want to do. But what Jeremy's pointing out there is, one of the ways that this all works is you take a person's coming with their BNB and they're buying tickets to the wheel. And then the point behind that is, from DogeWheel's perspective, is they're saying, hey, we're taking some of that. And of course, they're saying, of course, we need to put some of that aside to pay the jackpot and everything. And that's reasonable, right? Our question is, how much do they put aside? And can they just run off with that if it becomes a very large sum? That was the first question. But the other issue here is, while a lot of it, and we're going to show you this in the contract, while it's true and it's great that a lot of what they're taking in, they are using to buy DogeWheel with it. So that does help increase the price floor of the DogeWheel price. When they are taking some of that BNB people are using to buy tickets and they're buying DogeWheel token with it, that helps increase the value of DogeWheel token. The challenge is, a lot of the BNB that's coming into this is starting to pile up in that contract address, right? And we just showed that. I'll go back to it. A lot of that BNB, and this is what Jeremy was pointing out, is adding up here. And now ordinarily, and this is the important part, ordinarily with these type of lottery tokens, like Slam token, for example, that's had a really good rise in their market cap. I talked about that in another video when I was talking about the potential of DogeWheel doing really, really well. And other investors might have been, wanting to invest in this, thinking that this might do really, really well when you look at how well other lottery type tokens have done. But here's the difference. With the other lottery tokens, you're purchasing the native token, like you're purchasing Slam token. So when all of the BNBs coming in, it's not being held here in BNB. Like when people are when this BNB is being held here, that helps BNB's price floor. But when if everybody had to purchase DogeWheel token with their BNB, then this would be holding DogeWheel token, for example, and that would be increasing the DogeWheel price floor. Again, it's not like a terrible thing. It's just something to be aware of, that if a lot of people are buying tickets with BNB and a lot of that BNB is adding up over here, and if there's no measures for how much they can start saving, like of course they need to save, some to the side to cover jackpot and stuff, but how much and at what point? I mean, things aren't being discussed. And so if this starts to get to 5,000 BNB, 10,000 BNB, none of that is increasing the price of DogeWheel token. So these are just questions that we think would be great to delve into and have addressed really specifically. But go ahead, Jeremy. I just wanted to point that out.
Sure. And then you'll notice if you look on the transactions, there's internal transactions, there's the BEP20 token transactions, right? So you can see that this contract, is taking some BNB, and through smart contract interaction through Pancake Swap, they are then buying their own token, the DogeWheel token, and then sending it out to an address. So that part of what they're explaining as their means of trying to help keep the price of DogeWheel going up is this concept that their contract is now buying DogeWheel on a regular basis. It's questionable, is that mechanism going to be better than if they just held their own token to be able to disperse, right?
Instead of holding BNB, right?
Right. So now they're going through this, interesting process of having to constantly purchase the DogeWheel through this other smart contract, through Pancake Swap, through a conversion contract. So they're paying fees for that and whatnot as well.
Which again is what puts them in a position. And again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's for each investor to decide, but you just want to be aware, like that puts them in a position to be collecting BNB. And the big question to an investor would be that a smart investor should ask is, how much will they continue collecting of that BNB? And what risks does that create to an investor as that starts to become a very large sum? And now that a lot of BNB is going into this project, but not always leading to purchasing DogeWheel because it's collecting over here, is that something you want to invest with, as opposed to maybe a lottery token, a casino type token, where all BNB invested into it is actually immediately and directly is purchasing the token, thus increasing the price of that token. These are just questions you want to ask and understand. And it doesn't mean it's a bad project. It just, for me, these are important questions that would have to be answered if I'm going to be a long-term holder personally. So that's why we're bringing this to your attention.
Right. So the next thing that I notice is, because the contract has the BNB and they're purchasing the DogeWheel at the time somebody buys tickets in order to hand it out to them based on the spin of the wheel. If we now go to the contract creator and go to the wallet of the person who created it. So
is that under contract?
Nope, it's up in the upper right corner there.
Oh yeah, that's right here. Click on this one here, right?
Yeah, if we go to that address, that's the wallet address of the account that actually created that contract. So you can see here, if you look at the drop list of their tokens, so up where it says $0, if you look at that drop down, that shows you that they're holding 3.3 million DogeWheel tokens here right in the developer account. So if they were to go out and dump those, that could affect the price of DogeWheel. So that's a potential concern as well. So you got to look at how much a major holder of the DogeWheel token has that they could potentially dump on the market, right?
Yeah, and then they might have addressed this, but we just want to point that out, that you want to watch that number and see if it grows to some astronomical number, right? That's all Jeremy's pointing out there.
Right. The higher that gets compared to how many total tokens exist, the more of a risk that could become.
So it's something to watch. Absolutely.
Right. And then if we go back to the original transaction, we noticed that there was that weird scenario.
Should I go to the last page that we were just on?
To the last tab actually that we had open, the first tab that was open
So
up in
right, but
up in the URL.
which page? This page here or the previous, or the one I was just on?
Well, I had you control click and go into a new tab. So it's on another tab actually.
Oh, yeah, right here.
I wanted to save that. Yeah. So here you can see when the purchase was made, they did 1.53 BNB, but then 0.459 was sent to some address.
Yeah, so let me just to catch up, make sure that, and guys, sorry that I slow things down and repeat things. I want to speak to those who are also non-technical or may not be used to Bscan. So I'm going to speak to them as well and kind of interject. So just to remind you, what we're looking at here is somebody who had purchased tickets using BNB, and they purchased 1.53 BNB worth of DogeWheel lottery tickets. And and this is the contract address that, we were just looking at that processes that, where the BNB is paid into. And what Jeremy's pointing out is, what's interesting is 0.459, I know this might be small, but this says 0.459 BNB was transferred immediately into this other address of the 1.53. So the remaining, what is that, 1 point something BNB remained in the main contract. And then 0.459 was immediately transferred to this other address. We kind of want to look at that too, because we're following the money to see where this BNB all ends up.
Right. And that's actually the from address. If you go to the right, that's the to address. So that's where it actually went to. So that's the one we want to follow and see, okay, why did this 0.459 go to some other address, not a contract? That's an actual wallet address.
Actual wallet address, right. Some of this went to an actual wallet address. So should I click on that? Should we take a look at that?
Yep, sure.
So again, this is a wallet address that some of the BNB immediately is being sent to.
Right. So if you do the drop down of the tokens on this wallet, you can see that there are some various currencies here, but it's not actually holding any of the DogeWheel tokens, right? So, but there is BNB here. So now what we want to look at is under the BEP20 token transactions, or I'm sorry, under internal transactions. Internal transactions shows you incoming from smart contracts. So you can see a number of transfers are coming from that smart contract on a regular basis to this wallet address. My guess is this is one of the devs, or somebody who's getting royalties basically. So that's what I'm going to assume, is that the 0.0, a lot of them are 0.03, some of them are more, some of them are 0.06. I'm not sure exactly, without being able to see the code of the smart contract, why.
And a 0.09 as well.
Coded.
Yeah. A 0.18, a 0.54. So, and it's often, this is like, 3 hours, 2 minutes ago, 3 hours ago, 2 hours, 59 minutes ago. I mean, this is very, 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 very frequent. So there's small amounts perhaps, but they're so often, these are large amounts.
Right. And it could be a very valid reason. It could be one of the developers, that was their agreement, was that they would get a portion of every ticket sale or something.
But just understand again, guys, that it's important as investors to know this stuff. It's like, okay, so a portion of every transaction, right, Jeremy? Every transaction, a portion of it, we don't know if it's every transaction when people are buying tickets, but on a very consistent basis, a portion of what's coming in is ending up in this wallet on a very consistent basis. And one of the big questions is, and maybe they addressed it, but without looking at this and asking the question and knowing for sure, it's extremely important to have the space and opportunity to ask these questions and get answers. So the reason why it's important, and Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, for me, was that I don't know, because we can't look at the contract. Is that a number they can change? Is that a variable they can change on a whim? Can all of a sudden, I'm out there promoting this thing, I'm out there, risking my reputation and creating video after video, and this is starting to build up to some significant momentum, and all of a sudden, bam, these little transactions become big transactions. I mean, isn't that possible based on the information we have?
Exactly. So if you can't see, obviously this address is hard coded in some way, uh, or an adjustable through a function, that the address is in the smart contract, because that original transaction you noticed sent the money immediately to this address. So it is very common for a smart contract to take money and send it to another place. You know, there's a lot of smart contracts where that's the whole point of the contract, is money comes in, money goes out based upon whatever the smart contract is supposed to be doing or tracking. So it's not unusual to see a transaction where it shows money immediately going to a wallet address. But that is what you don't know, again, without being able to see the code and knowing what's going on. Can there be additional wallet addresses added? Can the amount of it be changed so that more of it is siphoned off, and none of it is really actually going to buy the DogeWheel tokens to then give to the winners, right? So those are the questions you just have to, it seems to be functioning the way it is, but they're the potential red flags.
Yeah, because again, this amount that's being constantly sent to this address could significantly increase. And it's already, why is it going here? Like, maybe they addressed it, but I didn't catch it. And so it's an extremely important thing to understand. I just want to point out, I don't want to knock you off track, Jeremy, because I know there's some points you were going to run through. I just want to point out that usually, guys, and by the way, SafeMoon and their big success, really locked this in as an expectation. People understand where all of the money's going, usually with the tokenomics. So usually there's a tax when someone buys a token, like DogeWheel token. There's a tax, and the tax is transparently discussed and revealed beforehand. And that, like in this case, there's an 8% tax whenever somebody buys or sells DogeWheel, and that 5% goes to the marketing wallet, and you can see that on every transaction. 2% goes to the jackpot fund to help save up money to pay for the jackpot. When people buy DogeWheel, that's supposed to happen. 1% goes to liquidity, and the transparency is there, and you can track all of this, and it's all over the blockchain. And that's what makes the blockchain so awesome, is it's all transparent and they're revealing this. But when we're seeing that there's this other avenue that people are able to pay with, BNB, if I kind of go back to this last slide, there's this other avenue that, you don't see projects typically have, where people can pay BNB to buy tickets in BNB. And this is a whole different set of tokenomics that isn't being transparently covered here. These tokenomics only cover when people purchase or sell DogeWheel token. There's no transparency that I can see about all this stuff that we're talking about where the BNB is going. And that's the transparency that as an investor I would be asking for. And I'm just, again, we're not saying that there aren't legitimate explanations for all this, and however it breaks down, maybe as an investor you'd say, yeah, I'm in. I'm just saying, as an investor, I need to see that transparency that usually is there, when projects are showing their tokenomics with the buy and sell of the token, that we're not getting fully here because they're taking in BNB. Does that make sense, Jeremy? I just want to make sure I said that clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really, that's the list that I had there, without having access to the code of the contract. And it may be that they had an audit done, and if they do an audit and share that, I don't know in this case that they did, without sharing their code. That's another way for developers to give people reassurance that there is no self-destruct, that things are set up the way that they're supposed to be set up. Right?
Yeah, and again, the real big question, among the ones we just covered, being this balance that's accumulating. I need to go back to that main. Here it is, 106 BNB now. Not a lot, but just $49,000 in there right now. But when people are paying with BNB, we understand that they might want to accumulate some as a buffer for the jackpot. Even though, let me underscore, even though that was addressed on the site, right? With this tokenomics, it is saying that when people buy DogeWheel token, 2% is put aside for the jackpot fund. But when the dev responded to me, he was saying, when they pay with BNB, they're also wanting to add to the jackpot fund. And that's reasonable. We're saying just that should be disclosed probably on the site when people, hear it saying what the tokenomics is and how things break down when people buy DogeWheel. Here's the tax. Like, how are things breaking down when people are buying tickets with BNB? Now, if they don't want to disclose that, they don't have to, right? But as investors, of course, we have every right to ask about it without being ridiculed, right? Without being made fun of. Like, I really want to underscore that we need to kind of flip the script in the BSC and make it more positive for the investor, more empowering for the investor. There needs to be a space for investors to be able to ask legitimate questions. And we really need to for me anyway, engage with the projects that are really open to these discussions. This is how we keep projects accountable to investors, which is extremely important and creates a win-win for everybody in the market. So Jeremy, anything else you wanted to just kind of to close out with?
And I was just going to follow up on what you just said
Yeah.
about the tokenomics, and that is absolutely right. You don't know that the tokenomics are still going to apply when they're going through the pancake swap and getting DogeWheel that way. It is possible to have a different route that doesn't have the same tokenomics that they could be using when they purchase it. So yeah, it would be nice if that was made transparent or at least verified in some way that it is actually going to follow the same tokenomics when they're buying DogeWheel through the contract the way they are.
So there's that. And then I just want to end with what we started with. This balance here of the BNB that's accumulating, we can't see the contract. There wasn't a full audit on this particular part of the contract that I'm aware of. And there isn't any discussion on the website about what happens with this BNB. As I was saying, as there usually is when there's the tokenomics shared of what happens when people buy the token itself. And so, there's all kinds of questions around this, like as this accumulates, at what point is enough to save for the jackpot? If this starts to get to some astronomical sum, which if this hits parabolic growth, if people like me, if influencers start promoting this and putting their reputations on the line and building community around it and creating excitement around it, and then this grows to like 11,000 BNB and some really large amount from all of that effort and from influencers putting their reputations on the line, and then all of a sudden they can just take off with that. Like, that's something that I need to know. And I think it's reasonable that I would need to know that, you know what I mean? So we're open to having an AMA and breaking this down with the dev of this project. We are completely neutral and objective about the whole process. I wouldn't even have come out and, tackled this so dead on if I hadn't have put so much information out about DogeWheel and introduced it to my community. But once I did that, that was based off of some major patterns in the market, like how successful other lottery tokens have been. But once I realized that there was this new type of way of, receiving money with BNP for the tickets that you don't usually see, I started to ask these questions. And, until I have clarity on it, I wouldn't want to invest into it personally. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't invest into it. And it doesn't mean I won't change my mind in the future. But these right now are big questions that the really big one, among a few others we raised today, being how high can this collection go? And is that, without looking at the code, since the code isn't available to us and there hasn't been a CERTIC audit or any really serious audit that I'm aware of, how do we know that this isn't something that could just be taken at some point, which would destroy the project and the reputations of any influencers that were to, support this over the long run? So I think these are all reasonable questions, Jeremy. I want to thank you for being here, kind of taking us through all of this and helping us kind of point out some of the risks that as investors we are looking at, finding more out about before we invest into this long term.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, thanks guys, and we'll follow up on this if we get more information. And share your thoughts below in the comment section if you know specific answers to this. Keep it respectful. Again, we're creating a space for investors to be able to ask questions, without the ridicule, without like getting attacked, without getting fear of getting booted from a group. It needs to turn into investors being able to hold projects accountable. And honestly, if a project has good intentions, they should welcome that, because a good discussion about the project that leads to clarity is only going to grow the project. And I think that just makes sense. Again, thanks, Jeremy, and we'll see you guys all soon.